Well, it's Fantasy Victory Now with Mike Durkin and Paul Charchian here. Charch, who are we going to expect to have the biggest fantasy fall-off from 2014 to 2015? It was a big year for rookies, but what about the old guys?
Yeah, you know, I hate to be the guy that tries to sneak one last season out of a player and then have it blow up and he falls off the face of the earth. So here are a couple of candidates. It's still early, right? We're months and months away from the official preseason rankings. But here's some candidates for guys that look like they're much older and might be near the end. Vincent Jackson will be 32 next year. He's probably going to be on a new team. Now, the Buccaneers used him a lot. Lots of targets. What about the new team? Yeah, you know, it's hard to know for sure what might happen with him. And he may still be with Tampa Bay. Maybe he's somewhere else. A lot of question marks here. And if he stays in Tampa, does he move really into that number 2 role we saw for a lot of last year behind Mike Evans, who looks like he's just, you know, potentially... It's early, but potentially a Hall of Fame caliber talent in Mike Evans.
Yeah, Tony Romo, he's having a great season. Doesn't seem like it, but he's 35 years old. 35
years old on Tony Romo, and definitely showing signs of breaking down already, right? So he's had the back injury so far. We saw that this year. And he's been injuries a lot of the last few years, and he's 35. So while we're not seeing obvious signs of him breaking down, and he was really good down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs too, which is great. But maybe next year's the year where the injuries catch up, the age catches up. You know, he's already not the most mobile quarterback. So next year, I may be very wary of a 35-year-old Tony Romo next year.
A guy who definitely looked like he was breaking down, saw a changing of the guard in Houston, Andre Johnson.
Andre Johnson will be 34 years old next year, and still no answer at the quarterback position in Houston. Andre Johnson has scored 2 times in his last 22 games. I don't think he will be in my top 40 wide receivers next year. So I'm going to be showing a ton of caution on Andre Johnson. And, you know, maybe if they somehow something develops at quarterback in the offseason, which we don't see, it'd be a little bit different. But, boy, you know, the productivity's way down. The touchdowns have never been common, and now they're even worse this year than normal.
He finished the year with a bang, kind of a 150-yard game. But
yeah,
how much gas is left in the tank for Frank Gore?
You know, don't carry that 150-yard game in your minds for the whole offseason, because that's not what he was doing most of last year. You know that if he was on your team. Frank Gore was a borderline disaster most of last year, highly inconsistent. He'll be 32, but that's a lot of miles on that 32, and I don't know that he will be with the 49ers next season. I think they move to Carlos Hyde. You know, he's had 2,417 carries. That means he's been tackled approximately 2,417 times. That's a lot of wear and tear for Frank Gore.
Yeah, a lot of mileage. Larry Fitzgerald, he's a guy who was on your list of guys to drop multiple times this year.
Yes, he was.
He's not getting in.
He was also on my list of guys not to draft this year, too. You know, it's not that he's so old at 31. And when Carson Palmer was at the helm, he still proved he can be valuable. And, you know, like that part about what Larry Fitzgerald brings, consummate professional, you know, there's a lot to like about him, but clearly he's lost speed. And that inability to gain separation from defenders means that he needs precision quarterbacking. If you've got a defender who's on top of you, that means the radius that the ball can be caught in is much smaller. And if it's Carson Palmer, fine. If it's anybody else, you know, we don't know. And it's unclear if he's going to be in Arizona, Larry, next season. He'll be due an $8 million signing bonus in March. That'll be hard to pay, especially when you know you have to pay him another $8 million in salary in season. So $16 million total investment in Larry Fitzgerald for 1 year is going to be tough on the Cardinals. I'm not even sure that he's with the Cardinals next year.
All right, Peyton Manning, a guy who has been Mr. Consistency for most of the last few years, but kind of a rough, shaky finish to this year. Has his December decline changed your forecast of Peyton Manning for 2015?
Well, you know, here's Peyton Manning's average game over the last 4 weeks. 224 yards, pretty bad. 1.25 touchdowns, really bad. 1.5 interceptions. Since when does Peyton Manning have more interceptions over a month of play than he does touchdowns? As a measure of comparison, let's use Teddy Bridgewater's last 4 games. Manning has thrown for 26 fewer yards per game, and Teddy has 2 more touchdowns in that month and 2 fewer interceptions in that month. So, yeah, when Peyton Manning goes a month and has a worse statistical month than Teddy Bridgewater, I'm a little rattled. So then I went and I started back my napkin list of the quarterbacks I would take for sure over Peyton Manning next year. Andrew Luck, absolutely. Aaron Rodgers, absolutely. But then it started to thin out really quickly. Drew Brees looks like he's in decline. Matt Ryan always has offensive line problems. Russell Wilson was great this year, but rushing performances are super hard to duplicate. Just ask Cam Newton this year. Tom Brady gets a year older. Tony Romo gets a year older. I don't know that I'm going to have Peyton Manning any lower than 3. So, yes, I am nervous. But in a year that looks like there's a ton of question marks coming up with these older quarterbacks, I don't know that Peyton Manning's going to be any lower than 3, even though, yes, I am nervous about what I've seen.
A view from the crystal ball of Paul Charchian. Hopefully that sets your stage for your off season and some things to consider going into next year's draft.